Howdy developers. So today we want to take a look at how do we get rid of data. And we're not going to talk about deleting data. That's where we are looking at just deleting one or two rows. We're going to talk about that in the future. No, I want to talk about getting rid of everything. Deleting an entire table and all of its contents. There's actually two different commands that you can use depending upon how you want to delete it. And so that's what we're going to look at. So we're going to look at truncate and drop, how they're similar and how they're different. So let's dig into that real quick to show you how we're going to do it. All right, I have over here orders, and you can see my table. You can see it's got some data in here. And let's say I want to delete out all the data, but I want to leave my table. This is where we use the truncate command. So I can go here, my query. I'm going to say truncate. And notice I put it all lowercase and let HeidiSQL capitalize it for me. That makes sure that I spell it correctly. I can say table if I want to. That's optional. SQL is going to be smart enough to know. And then I'm going to say orders, just like that. Click on my run command. And then I click the refresh button. But notice I have my table. All of my columns are still there. I can still use it, but there's no data at all. So I'm going to come over here real quick, and I'm going to paste all that back in, run it. Notice there's still no data there. Well, if I do the refresh, ta-da, there we go. All right, so how do I go about the process of doing that inside of HeidiSQL? I want to truncate that data. Well, I'm going to right-click on orders, and I'm going to choose empty table. So it's not truncate, okay? It's going to call it empty table. Do I want to empty this? Yes. Okay. And notice it went and did the refresh for me. That's something we typically see in HeidiSQL is if I use its tools, it does a refresh for me. So that just gets rid of my data. What happens if I want to get rid of the whole table? I don't even want to have the information about the table. Well, let's go in real quick. I'm going to re-add this data just so we can see it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the drop table command. So drop table orders. Now what that's going to do is it's going to actually get rid of the whole table. So all the data that's associated with it and the table structure. So sometimes I need to get rid of some data. That way I can work with it and do something else. I've just had like test data in it and I just want to get rid of it. Truncate's used for that. Drop table gets rid of the whole table as if it never existed. I'm going to come up to my database order example, refresh, and now notice that orders is completely gone. Okay, so it doesn't exist anymore. It's out of there. You might go, ooh, is this a good or bad thing? Well, depends on what you're trying to do. Sometimes you just don't need a table anymore. And sometimes we'll create a temporary table to do some work with, and then we need to drop it as it's no longer being used. It's a great example of how to get rid of it. Now, how would I do this inside of HeidiSQL using its commands? Very easy. Select my table, right-click, and I've got a drop. It's going to say, do I want it to? Am I sure? I click OK. It drops it. So that's how I do it inside of SQL, as well as how I do it within HeidiSQL. You can see it's a little bit easier inside of HeidiSQL, and you always have that, like, are you sure? Which is kind of nice to have from time to time. So keep that in mind as well when you're working with this. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If so, you're going to want to stick around for our next video, which is on how do we alter an existing table. That is, how do we make changes, like adding fields. So stay tuned for that coming up next on our playlist.